consecutively every year for like 4 or 5 years, right? From whether it was location or moving from a big like from a big house to a little apartment to a studio to whatever. Like so consecutively for 4 or 5 years, I was moving. And I think it gets easier to move the more you move because at some point you're like, there's just too much shit. I just have
Right.
too much, and you get less and less. So Jerry, now you have 40 years of not moving. I
It's hard to imagine the stuff I kept and all this stuff. But a lot of, obviously I'm moving in 3 days, so I have gotten rid of tons of stuff, tons of things. The problem is you look at some stuff and you go, oh, I can't really throw this away into the dumpster. I need to sell this or do this on a a garage sale or something like that. And then you go, I'm not going to do a garage sale.
too much work for the garage
There's
sale.
no
I've seen that
chance
forever.
in hell I'm doing a garage sale. So I find people who say, oh, I can sell that on eBay. Oh, yeah, take it all. But you have to take it all. You can't just take that one thing that you think you can sell on eBay. I've got more junk in that box that you got to get rid of for me.
But Jerry, you're talking about, and Steven's going to have to help me up on this. You're talking about finding those career builder recruiter dolls. You're talking about finding we're not just talking about crap. Like this is industry crap. So
I have industry history built into some of the boxes that I am moving.
If you did an estate sale, it would be an industry event. I imagine a line out front of people waiting to walk through the Crispin residence to put bids on, collectibles.
Maybe that's
Wait a
conference
second.
deal. I can go to the conference and say, who will bid on this?
Okay, so here's what you do is you display all of these mementos in your new home and open it to the public once a year as a museum. And then it's a nonprofit. You don't have to pay taxes on that. There was that Netflix show from maybe 5 years ago. I think it was like Dirty Money, and the guy had like all the autos in his home.
Oh my God. I think I just watched an episode of Billions where they did that with artwork and then they just made it suddenly a museum to walk through.
Who wouldn't want to drive across the country to see a career builder doll with, absolutely. I mean, I'll be there at 8:30 a.m.
The Museum of Recruiting Crap. I think that would.
Yeah, taxes in New York are not like going to Florida. So that's an interesting idea.
It's something. All right, you guys ready to go?
Good. Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
Welcome to the CXR channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
Good grief. I'm actually crying. I have tears in my eyes already. We only did the intro. My name is Chris Soyd. I'm the host for the next 20 minutes or so of this podcast. This is the Recruiting Community Podcast. It is brought to you by Career Crossroads. We don't have any ads that we run, so don't worry. You're not going to have to hover over that skip 15 seconds button. If you're listening on Spotify to sort of skip it, we're just talking to you about, whatever we're talking to you about. But we'll bring in folks from all over the recruiting industry to just chat about what's top of mind for them. And we bring some folks in who are recruiting leaders or practitioners, CEOs, founders, that sort of thing, but people that we think have some interesting things to say and that we want to share with you. The podcast does stream live, basically anywhere that you listen to podcasts, as well as on social media. We're on the LinkedIn, the Facebook, the Twitter, the YouTube. And of course, you can get the details over at cxr.works/podcast. And with that, I want to go ahead and welcome in today's co-host directly from the Peanut Gallery and always on the move, Mr. Crispin. How are you, Jerry?
Just wonderful. Today is a wonderful, slow day, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think we should kick off all of these with the moving updates on you and the status of your relocation project.
I am downsizing. Anybody who knows how old I am knows that it's time to downsize. but that has an emotional consequence when you have to rethink what it is that you're going to take with you. So that's kind of what we've been talking about.
Well, look, speaking of emotions, if you are here with us live on LinkedIn or any of the other channels that have a chat window in there, go ahead and say hello. Put a little emoticon in there, but drop in a hello. You can share your LinkedIn profile if you'd like to do a little bit of networking. But I tell you that because the live chat for this show is going to be kind of fun. We've got a return guest. We're going to just start calling him Mr. Podcast because he's all over the place. But you can drop a question in there. We'll be sure to do a shout out for you. I want to go ahead and say hello and welcome from the Peanut Gallery in the green room. Steven, how are you?
I am good. And I think that Jerry's life work is being summed up by the word tchotchkes.
I thought recruiting crap was a pretty good one. Not his work is crap.
There's a history element here that I think is important. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Well, look, Steven, I'm crying. I'm freaking crying. So, Steven, if for those who have not had the pleasure of meeting you or seeing you before, why don't you give us kind of an escalator pitch and let folks know kind of a little bit about your background, who you are, and why they should be listening to what you have to say.
I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm the founder of College Recruiter, a job search site. We believe that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. About 13 million use our site a year. Our customers are primarily enterprise level companies, government agencies, and other employers that hire at scale.
I love that. That is truly the escalator pitch. Well done.
Well, we're done here.
That's it, everybody. Thanks for dialing in. So, Steven, you are look. I think you're a little bit more than that. You got a lot going on in the space. I do want to share. You got a couple of podcasts that I think are worth mentioning. You're doing one with a friend, Peter of ours, that's on. We want to promote that. I'm going to put a link in the chat here in just a second. But you've also done a little bit of philanthropic work. Before we jump into cool topics, but you've also done a little bit of philanthropic work. I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that, if you'd like.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. So, I think you're probably referring to is right around a year ago at this time, when sort of the hot war, the major current war in Ukraine started, when Russia invaded, and I've felt like this need to get involved and to do something. As a 56-year-old who's only handled a gun maybe a handful of times in my life, going over there and actually doing something dangerous wasn't in the cards. But I did reach out to some folks that I knew in the US and in Europe, and one thing led to another, and probably 5 or 6 different people kept pointing me towards Andrew Stutsenko, who's owns a job board that's based in Ukraine. It's global. It's called relocate.me. And it basically helps tech workers anywhere in the world find jobs where they're going to be relocating to Australia, South Africa, the US, whatever. And he kind of put his business on pause in February of last year to do humanitarian relief, loading up his family's minivan with water, diapers, tourniquets, whatever, to help Ukrainian civilians who were under fire in the war. And I created a GoFundMe with him. One of the weird things, and it still exists, is that GoFundMe will not send money to people in Ukraine. I can kind of understand them not doing it to Russia, but they won't do it to Ukraine. So I came up with a bit of a workaround, created the GoFundMe tied to my account, my bank account. So when you donate money to that, then the money comes to me, usually the same day. I then move that to Andrew via PayPal. And then he goes out and buys thermal underwear, blankets, medicine, whatever, for Ukrainian civilians. And I think we've raised over $30,000 so far. My guess is Andrew has probably saved the lives of thousands of people with just basic humanitarian efforts. And certainly I've helped, but the vast majority of that is on him. It's really remarkable the work he's done.
Wow. Well, I've put it, excuse me, I put it in the chat. We've got it on an overlay if you're watching live, but I also put it in the chat. I think the chat is just going to Facebook and YouTube today. For some reason, it's not going to LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, it is relocate.me. It's that easy. So thanks for all of that and to that entire team that does that work. That's just really admirable stuff.
Yeah. And if somebody wants to donate, shoot me an email, Steven@collegerecruiter.com, and I'll get you the link for that.
Okay, easy enough. Good stuff. I'll leave it up for a little bit. I want to say hello to Desiree, and we got a couple of people in there saying howdy and hi in the chat, and that's okay. But Steven, so well, let's do this too, because you're also part of, I mentioned earlier from a podcast perspective, you're also doing some work on high volume recruiting, and then you've got another podcast. I think you're the co-host of both of these that you're doing with Peter Zollman on what's inside job boards. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we were naming that, so Peter Zollman is the founding principal of the AIM Group. They publish a variety of reports on autos, real estate, job sites, classified advertising sites globally. They're probably the best analysis or source of analysis for that. So some of their subscribers will be employers. Some of them will be investment banking companies, industry players like we subscribe to it and stuff. And it's a really great source of information. It's not just regurgitated press releases. It's actual analysis. It's what we used to call journalism. And so Peter and I are the co-host. When we were naming the podcast, we realized that there was no cost to using more words. And so, hey, why not use as many as possible? So it's the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast. Vanna, may I buy a vowel? And and so he and I publish weekly, and we're actually just announced yesterday that we're going to be doing pretty much what you're doing here. This seems like it's a much better way of reaching people in our industry. We're at our desks more. Jumping onto something on LinkedIn for 15, 20 minutes, it fits in nicely. You can have coffee, you can have lunch, whatever. And the other podcast I'm the host of is also going to be migrating in roughly a month, and that is the High Volume Hiring Podcast. That one I economized on the number of words in the title. So the Inside Job Boards one is about the job boards and recruitment marketplaces industry. Different sites, different ways of doing business. What works in Malaysia, we'll talk about that. What works in Belgium is very different. We'll talk about that. And then hopefully the listeners can kind of pull that all together and understand how to better work with a job board if they're an employer, or if they are a job board, how to do a better job. We talk about things like taking transactions in multiple currencies. If you're a UK company and you want to buy job ads in Brazil, how do you do that? It's not as easy as it sounds, especially when you start to get into programmatic and pay-per-click and you've got different currencies in different countries. It gets messy really quickly.
There's
high volume is, go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
No, sorry. I was just going to say there's two job board topics. If people want to go super deep, that we can head them over there. But there are two job board topics that keep coming up with some of the members Jerry and I are talking to. One is the regards to cost per applicant, pay per applicant. Application, which has come up, reared its head. I think we all knew that was coming last year, but on Indeed, they've made that shift. I think it caught some people by surprise. Maybe it should have, maybe it shouldn't have. But that I think that's slightly different debate. So we could talk a little bit about that. And then the other one I'd like to also talk a little bit about is maybe your take on Chat GPT, or this type of ML and AI learning that goes into the job board equation, because I think there's some potential on both sides of that, right? So which one of those do you want to jump on first?
So what I'm hearing, Chris, is that you're giving me a choice of either stepping into quicksand or into a big pile of shit.
But I'm
it's
giving
my
you
choice.
a vine to swing over both.
We'll be the evaluators of that, of the result of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of picturing like the like the movie. It's like Gladiator. Okay, he's okay. So Why don't we just take them in the order that you talked about them? So the shift to pay for performance has been going on. In my mind, I see the big shift to pay for performance starting 23 years ago when Google started to sell advertising on a pay-per-click basis. They didn't invent it, but they sure as heck popularized it. It took job boards and the rest of the talent acquisition industry only 2 decades to start to catch up to that.
It's relatively fast.
So it's relatively fast, and compared to some of the other technology embracements that we've made, there's been a massive shift in the last probably 4 or 5 years in the US, and now Canada is closely behind the US, and the UK is also closely behind. In a year, probably the three markets will all be on par. Next is the European Union, and the rest of the world pretty much is just not there at all. And it's probably going to be 3, 4, 5 years before we see it. So cost per click, rather than paying for an ad that runs for 30 days, traditional post and pray, you get what you get.
Right.
Those ads served a purpose. That pricing is easy to understand. It's the same advertising model as Benjamin Franklin used for his newspaper in the 1700s. You're not going to pay for results. We're going to run your ad. Send us money, and go F yourself if it doesn't work.
Well,
That's
or
basically
or
that
if it's
model.
not working well enough, give us more money, because that was
and then start to play games like logging in and editing your ad so it goes to the back of the top of the search results, which hasn't been a thing for only 15 years, but employers still do it.
I remember
things like
doing
that
to my job postings.
Top of that. It worked, and it worked really well until the job board said stop it, because it was just a bunch of spam is basically what was happening. The posting wasn't any more relevant than it was the day before, and the recruiters were kind of tricking the software into thinking they were more relevant. Anybody that knows anything about SEO, you never want to try to trick the search engine. It always comes back, but in the long term. But cost per click, when that started to become popular, the click usually, but not always, has been the candidates on the job board clicks the apply button, goes to the ATS. And Indeed, bless their hearts, and I'm not an Indeed hater by any stretch of the imagination, they kind of muddied that water with the to-pane and stuff like that. And now are you clicking from the search results to the job detail page, and then there's another click to it got confusing. There's not so if anybody out there is like, I don't understand what a click is, you have good reason to not understand what a click is, because there's not a common definition for it, as crazy as that sounds. So now we've also gone another step, which is going to complicate things even more, and now it's cost per application. Well, what's an application? If you're on Indeed or some other job boards and the candidate completes the application on the job board, I think we all understand that's an application. You pay for that. But what happens when you go over to the ATS? Just clicking over to the ATS is an application. Well, the last time that I saw numbers from AppCast, 93% of those clicks do not convert into applications. So 7 out of 100 of those clicks are not actually applications, but you're calling them applications. So let's add on another layer of confusion. Talent acquisition people have an absolute right to be frustrated as hell, because it's one thing to ask somebody to shift their business model, but you have to be able to explain to them what you're asking them to switch it to. But it's murky. So there's the quicksand.
So tight budget TA teams are feeling that immediately in just the last few months, like feeling to me, especially the smaller businesses, whereas they maybe had a couple of $100 set from a budget standpoint we'll just use Indeed as the example, right? Because that's what we're talking about. So as they had that budget set, all of a sudden getting an invoice or getting a charge on their cards, that's 10 times that.
Yeah. So that's a great point, Chris. One of the big frustrations with the SMBs, the small and medium-sized businesses out there, there's been tons of discussion on LinkedIn, because why wouldn't you go to a job board to complain about job boards, is that You had exactly what you're saying. Employers had $200 budgets. All of a sudden, they're getting bills for $2,000. So Indeed, to their credit, said straight up, we screwed up. That there were a small number of employers that those caps, those budgetary caps, did not move over. It was a technical problem. And then all those employers need to do is contact their rep, and it's reversed like that. So
Make it right.
I don't see that as being the budgetary issue as being the same. I think that was an error in the rollout, in the technology. That's really different to me than the pricing shift. Earlier, you were talking about how there's been some confusion, whether employers should be confused or not confused. I don't ever think it's on the customer to have the onus of finding out information about a longtime vendor. If a longtime vendor makes a fundamental change in the value that they deliver to you, it's on the vendor to make sure that you understand. It's different if you're a new customer. Then you have some onus in explaining what matters to you, what doesn't matter to you, what questions do you have. But if you've been working for Indeed for 10 years in the same way, why would you be checking and really looking into things that you don't even know exist?
Okay, so now you're talking about a customer care, right, and customer management issue, right? And we could belabor that all day long. I'm kind of interested though, and correct me if my memory serves. So College Recruiter switched to cost per applicant like back in 2015, 2016, something like that, sort of ahead of the game, yeah?
Sort of. We started to migrate in 2016.
Okay.
To cost per click. We do have a small number of customers that buy on a cost per application basis. If I were to put 1,000 of our customers into the room, probably 990 of them are cost per click. Probably 1 or 2 of them are traditional duration based. And then the rest, whatever the hell that math is, Jerry, help me out, 6 or 7. Those would be cost per application. The vast majority of enterprise level customers are not yet ready for cost per application. They don't really understand it. It's really hard. For example, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether it's duration based or cost per click or cost per application or paying, when the sun comes up. What really matters at the end of the day is that you get the candidates into your funnel that you need to hire people, and what action they take that triggers the cost. I don't think it really matters. The closer we get to paying per hire, I actually think that's better for the employer because it shifts the risk to the job board. It aligns the interests between the job board and the employer more, because if the candidate doesn't click or if the candidate doesn't apply, the employer doesn't pay anything.
Well, I agree with that. But there's 2 things I just want to double check with you. One is whether they're ready or not. Indeed is almost 100% cost per application at this point.
Yes.
So there's that.
Yes.
And the other,
they are the 800-pound gorilla. Right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's some little tiny niche site that who the hell gives a crap about. This is the major source of applicants.
They're getting good at forcing change.
So you're going to get ready if you're spending money with Indeed. And the other piece was if someone presses submit, they completed the application from their perspective. Are you saying that there's a significant number of failures of that information to now be in the ATS of the employer?
If it's not that sort of. You're a candidate, you're on Indeed, you see a job ad for your typical Fortune 1000, which probably most of the listeners are, right? Most of the listeners probably are requiring the candidate to go over to the ATS to apply. That's where the drop off is. So roughly 93% of the clicks from Indeed or any other job board do not convert into applications. The candidate goes to the ATS and they do not apply.
But then is Indeed charging them for a completed application?
they're charging them for what they call an apply start, which is the same thing as when we charge for a click. The Indeed calls it an apply start. Welcome to the quicksand. Now,
All right,
I'm
let me-
not saying that
let
what
me make
Indeed is
sure I
doing is,
understand here.
it's just, I think this is a problem that Indeed, because of their size, that other job boards are going to adapt to. The language, I think, will become clearer over the coming years. But in the meantime, TA, man, you have a right to be confused.
But at this moment, I have an ATS. I'm a big company. I have an ATS.
Yeah.
I don't want Indeed sending me applications. I want Indeed sending me people who complete applications.
Right.
But since Indeed can't tell once they've sent somebody to my ATS whether they've in fact completed the application, they are essentially charging me for the click to get to the application form.
You're talking about application start or application
correct.
Intro. You're not talking
Yeah,
about
it's so
Is that a different price
for a
than
lot of
completed application?
Yeah, although some employers, many employers, roughly 90% of our clients will provide us with what we call conversion data. When we send a click to the ATS, does that person convert? And so if the employer is able and willing, two different things, to share that data with Indeed, then Indeed is able to take on more risk, and then they only charge you for the completed application. That's where the industry is going. So whether a TA person loves it or despises it, sorry, get used to it, because this is going to be the new reality. It's like June of 2020. You can hate wearing a mask on an airplane, or you can love it. But if you want to ride the airplane, you got to wear the mask. And that's going to.
What this takes me back to is my jobs to web days. This takes me back, and I miss that dude. But this takes me back to the job to web days when like every single click was in question. Every single activity reported or requested was in question. And it ultimately seemed to come down to just trust, right? And Paul, if you're still, I think you're still, I'm going to throw that back up. Paul makes a point that I think while we were talking, and Paul says, but most of these systems suck. He's not wrong.
Yeah.
How will anyone know what the source of hire really is? We generally don't know this today, which is still fascinating that we can't quite get there. But Bill also chimes in and says, Bill says he's gotten very good results using Indeed's pay, this is all hyphenated, pay only for an applicant. If you are happy with the applicant.
So I think both are right. I know both well. Paul more or less lives down the street from me. So I know him better. I think that Paul's perspective on this is more typical for an SMB. That a typical SMB has less of an ability to actually know where the applicants are coming from. But every major ATS for over a decade has made it actually really easy to use some kind of source tracking. And if TA provides the code to the job board, then when the job board sends the candidate over to the ATS automatically knows this candidate came from CareerBuilder, Monster, College Recruiter, LinkedIn, Indeed, wherever the heck that candidate came from. It's automatically attributed. And that works really, really well. Now, multiple source attribution is a disaster. Okay. So if you go to Glassdoor and do some research about what is the best logistics company to work with, and then you go over to LinkedIn and you connect with the hiring manager, and then you go over to Indeed and you apply to the job, what's the source? It's going to be Indeed. But shouldn't Glassdoor get some credit there, and shouldn't LinkedIn get some credit there?
You're talking about weighted sources again,
right? And it's like that,
tracking all of this. I mean, you just talking
Steven,
about.
We're not going to get there until there's standards, and there are not going to be standards. But I can tell you that the number one source for many years, until I stopped, I got so frustrated I stopped doing it. So in 2015, number one source. People think, oh, referrals. No, the number one source was other.
Yeah, or career site. meaning the employer's career site, which
alphabetical.
is never a source. It's a destination, and you and I have shared more than one glass of wine and agree on that. So at the end of the day, Jerry's tchotchkes are going to be on a shelf someplace for longer than any of us will be alive, and this issue will still be out there. So God bless the tchotchkes.
Well, look, we're running out of time because we try to keep these about as long as I like to spend on a treadmill, and then just kind of wrap them up nicely because they are a quick chat. I want to thank everybody who joined in live. Steven, before we let you go, and we asked this of all our guests, so you had to know it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to write a book on this topic, what we're talking about today. What do you think the title of that book would be and why?
Pay me now or pay me later.
I love that. And who gets the first signed copy? Can't be Jerry, right?
If I give it to Jerry, it's just going to end up in a box in an attic.
He's not wrong. In a basement. It's Jersey, right? It's just basements out in Jersey. All right, really, I'm going to leave you guys on the screen as I talk through a couple of these. We've got some updates, but before I do that, Steven, thank you again for being on the show. We love it. Really
thank
quickly,
you, Chris.
Let me pull this. Where did my mouse go? Let me pull this.
Don't go away, Steven. Hang out.
Don't go anywhere. I want to remind everybody, evergreenpodcast.com/high-volume-hiring. That is the High Volume Hiring Podcast. And then you've also got the podcast with Peter Zollman over at the AIM Group, and that is evergreenpodcast.com/inside-job-boards, all one. You can pick which one of those they have to buy a vowel for and how that works, but that's fine. Hang out. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah. Or just use the search on LinkedIn. We have pages for both.
Awfully easy. Or hit the profiles. Hit your profile. You'll find it there. It's not hard to find there. Easy peasy. For those members who are still dialed in listening to us or who are watching this, back by popular demand, we've got Andrew Flowers, who is the lead labor economist. You heard Appcast mentioned earlier before, coming back for his third discussion with us on recruiting economics. We're excited about that. That's on the 2nd. If you are part of the book club, awesome. If you are not, you should check it out. cxr.works/books. They are talking about Michelle Obama's book, The Light We Carry. March 3rd, I think, is that second meeting that they've got set up for that. You can check that out. That is open to anybody, not just members. And then I think on our next show coming up, you've got Mike Woodrow from Aspen Tech Labs, who's going to come in and join us here on the podcast next time. So until then, we're going to wish everybody a wonderful rest of their week. And tell you what, Jerry, why don't you take us out? Say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
That's all we need.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works, facebook.com and twitter.com/careercrossroads, and on Instagram @careerxroads. We'll catch you next time.